I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes. The devil's eyes. Hi, I'm Moose, and I've always been intrigued by what makes movie slashers tick. We all know Jason's out for revenge on the camp counselors who let him drown and chopped off his mother's head with a machete. Freddy's feasting on fear to keep his legend alive, and Chucky just wants a new body that doesn't require batteries. But when it comes to Michael Myers, the OG slasher icon has always been an international man of mystery. Today, we'll attempt to answer the question that has plagued horror fans, Haddonfield residents, and creepy psychologists since 1978. Why does Michael Myers kill? John Carpenter's game-changing first film gives basically zero explanation for the Shape's rampage. But after the night he came home, subsequent sequels would try to pin a motive on the mindless mass murderer, and the best they could do was the Curse of Thorn. After Michael's death in the first sequel, Halloween 3 took the series in a drastic new direction. Instead of focusing on a single serial killer, the producers envisioned Halloween as an anthology series featuring unrelated stories centering around everyone's favorite night of the year.
Why, Cocker? Why? Do I need a reason?
The Celtic festival called Samhain first appeared on screen as a mysterious message from Michael in Halloween 2, but Season of the Witch played on the holiday's ancient origins as the backdrop for a story about mystical masks, human sacrifice, and the power of Stonehenge.
Stonehenge, where a man's a man and the children dance to the pipes of Pan.
Halloween 3 wasn't what the audience was looking for, but when Michael Myers returned in the next film, his inevitable origin was inspired by the same druidic ritual. Halloween's 4, 5, and 6 form a loose trilogy, where Michael's on the hunt for his cousin Jamie, with some help from a mysterious man in black helping him from the shadows. That would be Dr. Terrence Wynn, the administrator of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, who, turns out, has been orchestrating Michael's killing spree since the very beginning, enlisting an evil babysitter to fill his head with cultist thoughts, and orchestrating his escape in the beginning of Halloween 1, which finally answers the age-old question of how can Michael Myers drive a car?
Now, for God's sakes, he can't drive a car. He was doing very well last night. Maybe someone around here gave him lessons.
In part 6, we learn that Wynn is the leader of the Cult of Thorn, and that Michael's strength, invulnerability, and madness comes from an ancient curse. Legend has it that in olden times, the stars would select one child in a village and mark them with thorn. They were granted supernatural powers and compelled to sacrifice their entire family on Halloween night in order to stave off plague and pestilence and ensure that next year's harvest would be bountiful and plenty. Now, depending on which version of Halloween 6 you're watching, the cult is either trying to pass on the curse to another innocent host, like in the producer's cut,
Michael, your final sacrifice.
or they're studying Michael's DNA to create a race of evil, genetically engineered supermen.
I thought Michael was a monster. But you?
Either way, it's all just kind of a mess. I appreciate trying to tie Michael more closely to the titular holiday, but making him the centerpiece of a cult conspiracy kind of takes away from the terror of his random rampage. The Thorn trilogy would be retconned out of existence by Halloween H2O, which made use of a much more simple motive introduced in the second film, the Myers family ties. John Carpenter refused to direct Halloween 2, saying, "I already made that film once and I really didn't want to do it again." But he still wrote the script with his partner Deborah Hill and introduced a twist that would have major ramifications on Halloween lore for decades to come. Taking place the same night as the first film, Michael Myers pursues Laurie Strode to the hospital where she's taken to recuperate. Meanwhile, Loomis is doing some sleuthing and discovers that Laurie is actually Michael's biological sister, who was adopted and shrouded in secrecy for her safety. This is a pretty big retcon, but it actually fits with the first movie pretty well. After all, Michael's first victim was his sister Judith, so it makes a twisted kind of sense that he's got some deep-seated issues with his sisters. But Laurie's connection to Michael was nowhere to be found in the original, at least not in the theatrical version. During production of Halloween 2, the producers actually shot some extra scenes for the TV version of the first movie, including one where we see that Michael scratched the word sister into his cell at Smith's Grove.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
Michael's family fixation continued after Laurie's off-screen death as he developed a psychic bond with his cousin Jamie, who he targeted and eventually impregnated. Incestuous fatherhood is a pretty good way to kill Michael's mystique, so H2O ignored movies 4 through 6, but they retained Laurie's role as Michael's baby sister.
My brother killed my sister when she was 17.
Well, that's sucky. How'd he do that?
With a really big, sharp kitchen knife.
Halloween 2018 is the first to remove that retcon and return the series to Carpenter and Hill's original vision. But before we get there, we should at least touch on the Rob Zombie reboot, which showed us all the dirty details of Michael's troubled youth. Originally, Michael Meyers was a perfectly well-behaved little boy, until one night he murdered his sister out of the blue and spent his adolescent years locked up in a sanitarium. But according to Zombies Halloween, Michael began exhibiting the telltale behaviors of a sociopath at an extremely early age, namely, just killing a bunch of cute little innocent animals. We also learned that the big bad boogeyman was shaped by trauma and abuse at the hands of his scumbag stepfather, and Judith, who spends most of her screen time berating her little bro. So when he finally snaps on that fateful Halloween, it's not really a random occurrence, but a deeply disturbed kid lashing out at his bullies. The only people Michael has any sort of bond with are his mother and his baby sister Boo, who later grows up to be Laurie Strode, and instead of trying to kill her, he just wants to be friends. It's a clear but fairly pedestrian motivation for Michael Meyers, and I was never really a fan. It removes the horrifying randomness as his first kill, and it paints the slasher as sympathetic, sweet, and other qualities you don't typically associate with the embodiment of evil itself. I don't mind a little peek into Michael's psyche, but fleshing him out too much kills some of the fear. That's why I'm glad the new movie is cutting all that extraneous noise and returning to Michael's original motive, the scariest one of all, where Michael Meyers kills for no reason. The original script for Halloween only refers to Michael as the Shape, and it doesn't offer any insight into his upbringing, his insanity, or his motives. That's because they didn't exist. As originally envisioned, Michael Meyers killed because he was pure, unstoppable evil. He's a supernatural force of nature, unkillable and unknowable. Carpenter and Hill didn't have any deep backstory they were dying to tell. They didn't have an epic 9-part saga in mind. They just wanted to scare the shit out of you. Michael isn't an abused child, a brainwashed cult assassin, or a fratricidal maniac. He's the boogeyman, and asking why he kills is like asking a tornado or a tidal wave why they do what they do.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
There's no reasoning, no logic, just death, destruction, and a search for answers that don't exist.
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Locking Michael to an ironclad motivation limits the stories you can tell with him. You're always gonna have to pull some new distant relative out of your butt, or just keep piling on the cult stuff until we're barely in a slasher movie anymore. But if there's nothing behind the wheel but evil, you can drop the Shape in any plot you like, whether it's butchering babysitters or chopping up a bunch of assholes who turned your childhood home into a reality show.
Let the dangertainment begin out there.
It might be a cop-out to say that Michael kills because he's evil, but considering the alternatives, that stark simplicity is what makes him so effective. Would Jaws be more frightening if we found out he had a personal grudge against the Brodies? Did learning that Jason's spirit could possess anyone who ate his heart make him any scarier? Or were they at their best and most terrifying when the only thing that came to mind when you saw these monsters was run? When it comes to horror, the less we know, the better. And when it comes to Michael Meyers, well, it turns out Dr. Loomis had him pretty much figured out 40 years ago.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and happy Halloween. Which continuity of the Halloween series do you follow? Do you like all that cult stuff? Do you wish Jamie Lee Curtis was still his sister? Do you wish they followed up on the weird mask thing more? Leave a comment, let me know, and as always, please subscribe to Now This Nerd.